Before you immerse yourself in tonight's terror, hit that subscribe button if you think you can handle even darker stories lurking in the shadows. I've been a deep-sea diver for years, so when I tell you I know my way around this stuff, I really mean it. I've taken on some risky contracts, exploring places no one else would dare go, all for the right price. But this one felt different. It started with a private company offering me an insane amount of money to explore a place called the Abyssal Rift, an uncharted trench in the ocean. The reason it's called that? It's not just another deep spot in the sea. It's a place where previous dives went wrong. Divers vanished, or worse, came back to about stuff like eyes in the dark and a voice that knows. Yeah, sounds like the kind of thing you'd hear in a horror movie, right? But here's the thing. My best friend disappeared on a dive just like this a few years ago, and I've never gotten over it. He was last seen heading into a place like this, and I never found out what happened to him. So when this company came to me with the offer, I didn't even really think about it. I just needed closure. I figured I could do one last dive, get in and out, and never look back. Maybe I'd figure out what happened to my buddy. Maybe I'd bring something back that would make sense of all this weirdness. Now, let me walk you through how we do this. For deep-sea exploration like this, it's not just jumping into some wetsuit and diving in. No, we use a submersible vehicle, basically a mini-sub. It's not the same as a regular scuba tank. This sub is designed for extreme depths with reinforced hulls to withstand the pressure of the ocean at these depths. It's got thick glass ports for seeing outside and lights, big, powerful spotlights to pierce the deep dark of the ocean. Before the dive, I made sure everything was working right. I went through the checklist: oxygen tanks, backup systems, sonar, communication lines, all of it. I checked the spotlight, tested the sub's thrusters, and made sure the pressure seals were tight. This was my last dive, so I wanted to make sure everything was perfect. I couldn't risk anything failing on me. The team handed me a laminated card right before I got in. They said I needed to memorize these rules. They weren't asking, they were telling. I took the card, looked it over, and felt a weird weight in my stomach. I mean, I'd heard of strict protocols for deep dives, but this felt different. These weren't just safety guidelines, they were something else. Here's what the card said. Rule 1, always keep your spotlight on. Never turn it off. Rule 2, if you see movement in the dark, stay still and wait for it to pass. Rule 3, do not approach or get too close to anything glowing. Rule 4, if something knocks on the sub or signals its presence, turn off all systems and stay silent. Rule 5, never go deeper than 4,500 meters, no matter what you see. The team emphasized that breaking these rules would result in death or worse. I brushed off their warnings as superstition, but that sinking feeling in my gut didn't go away as the dive began. I could feel the weight of their words hanging over me, but I was determined to push forward. I wasn't here to turn back. The sub moved steadily, the low hum of its engines vibrating through the controls beneath my fingers. As I descended deeper, I found myself checking the spotlight every few minutes, keeping it steady, making sure it didn't flicker like that last dive I'd done. The further down I went, the darker it became. At 3,000 meters, the ocean shifted from its deep midnight blue to an impenetrable black. It was like someone had swallowed every bit of light, and I was the only thing that still existed in the vast emptiness. I adjusted the sub spotlight, cutting through the darkness like a blade, the beam slicing through the water, illuminating nothing but blackness. The pressure on my chest felt heavier now, the weight of the ocean pressing in from every side. I kept the light steady, focusing on the beam, but then, flicker. For just a second, the light faltered, and my heart skipped a beat. I immediately reached for the controls, my fingers shaking as I scrambled to stabilize the connection. The spotlight flickered again, just long enough to set my nerves on edge. My breath caught in my throat as I tried to steady the sub, willing the light to stay on, my pulse pounding in my ears. Finally, the spotlight steadied. It was back, but in that brief moment of darkness, I saw something. It wasn't a whale. It wasn't a shark. No, this thing was massive, too massive. It moved with a fluid grace like liquid, but far too large, stretching just beyond the light's edge. My stomach twisted. There was no way it was a trick of the light. No way it could be something natural. I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself I was imagining things, but the feeling wouldn't leave. The cold, creeping sensation that something was out there, watching. The spotlight cut through the darkness, but I couldn't shake the image of that massive shape, slipping away just beyond the reach of the light. I adjusted the controls again, trying to steady my breath, but the pressure on my chest felt heavier now. The ocean, the rules, the warnings, all of it was starting to feel too real. At 4,200 meters, the ocean floor finally came into view, a vast, endless expanse of jagged rock and silt, stretching out beneath me like a forgotten wasteland. I maneuvered the sub carefully, keeping the spotlight steady, my eyes scanning the dark expanse. Everything felt wrong. The pressure was starting to get to me, the weight of the ocean pressing in from all sides, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking just out of sight. Then, out of nowhere, I saw it. A shadow darting across the seabed, quick and silent, vanishing almost as soon as I caught a glimpse. My heart slammed against my ribs. I froze, gripping the controls tightly, my fingers sweating on the levers. I knew I had to stay calm, but instinct was screaming at me to move, to get out of there as fast as I could. But I remembered the rules. Rule 2, if you see movement in the dark, stay still and wait for it to pass. I couldn't break the rules. Not now, not after everything I'd been told. So I held my breath, pressing my hands harder against the controls, trying to keep the sub still. The seconds felt like hours. My eyes were glued to the spotlight, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever had moved was still there, just beneath me. And then, as if in slow motion, the shadow stopped. It was massive, easily the size of a semi-truck. Its shape was unclear, but it hovered just beneath the sub, moving with an unnatural stillness. I could feel it. The sub shuddered slightly, like it was being examined by whatever was down there. I tried to steady my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadow didn't move, just stayed there, hovering, and I couldn't move either. I was paralyzed, my instincts telling me to flee, but I couldn't. The rules: stay still, wait for it to pass. Minutes crawled by. The dark water outside felt suffocating. Every second seemed like an eternity, my eyes never leaving the spot where the shadow lingered. I had no idea how much time had passed, but it felt like a lifetime. Finally, the shadow began to glide away, disappearing into the abyss beneath me. I thought it was over, but just as I started to relax, I heard it. A low, guttural growl that seemed to reverberate through the hull of the sub. It was so deep, so primal, that I could feel it in my bones, and it wasn't like anything I'd ever heard before. It was almost human. The sound echoed in my ears long after it stopped, and I felt my pulse race again. The shadow had moved on, but I couldn't shake that growl. It was like nothing from this world, like it wasn't meant to be heard by human ears. I gripped the controls tighter, my thoughts swirling. Was this what I was meant to find down here? Was this what my friend had encountered? I wasn't sure anymore, but I knew I couldn't turn back. Not after everything I'd seen, after everything I'd heard. At 4,500 meters, I checked the sonar, trying to steady myself. The screen flickered once, twice, then went haywire. The lines scrambled in a chaotic mess, and my stomach clenched. I squinted at the radar, watching as something massive appeared. It was moving, circling the sub, faster than any creature I had ever heard of. The radar blips were erratic, the object disappearing and reappearing with impossible speed. It was taunting me, daring me to believe my eyes. Something that size shouldn't exist down here, not at this depth. I could feel a cold sweat break out on my skin, the pressure of the ocean surrounding me intensifying as my mind raced. I didn't know what I was dealing with, but I knew I didn't want to find out. I wasn't alone down here. Suddenly, without warning, the sub shook violently, a jarring force that rattled the entire vessel. I felt the hull groan under the pressure, and for a split second, I thought it might crack, might give way to the crushing weight of the ocean. My heart hammered in my chest as something brushed against the sub's side, a slick, heavy sensation that sent a shiver down my spine. I gripped the controls so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath came in shallow gasps, but I couldn't afford to panic now. I had to stay calm. I had to stay focused. Another shake. The sub groaned again, the metal protesting under the pressure. Every part of me screamed to turn around, to abandon the dive and race back to the surface. But I couldn't. The rules, the mission. I wasn't here to run. I pushed forward, my vision narrowing as I fought to control the sub. The sonar was still flashing, still showing that impossible presence circling me. I didn't know what it was, but I could feel it. The presence, the weight of it just outside the sub. Watching, I had no choice but to keep going. The weight of the silence was almost unbearable at 4,500 meters. I sat in the dark, the pressure of the ocean pressing in from all sides, the hum of the subsystems the only sound. The sonar was still glitching, still showing that eerie presence circling me, but I could hear nothing else. It was as if the entire ocean had gone silent, holding its breath, waiting. That's when it came, 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the hull. Thud, thud, thud. The sound was unmistakable, each strike heavy, like a fist pounding against a door. My heart stopped, my blood turning to ice. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and for a moment I couldn't move. What the hell was that? I scrambled for the controls, my hands shaking as I tried to turn off the systems. The lights flickered out, plunging the sub into darkness. The only thing I could hear now was my own ragged breathing, the sound of my pulse pounding in my ears. I held my breath, straining to listen for any other noise, any sign of what was out there. Minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an eternity. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, just the sub reacting to the pressure, maybe some kind of underwater creature brushing against the hull. But deep down, I knew it wasn't that. It couldn't be. Then, just when I thought it might be over, I heard it. A soft, deliberate scratching on the glass. It was faint at first, just a whisper. But then it grew louder, the sound of claws scraping across the viewport, each stroke slow and purposeful. My stomach churned. I didn't dare look, not even for a second, but the sound was enough to make my skin crawl, to make my blood run cold. I stayed still, as if frozen in time, like a corpse suspended in the deep, too terrified to move, too aware of the danger lurking just beyond the glass. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I knew better than to break the rules now. I had to stay still. I had to wait. But I was trapped. Trapped in this small, fragile shell, surrounded by an abyss that seemed to press in from every direction, and whatever was out there was toying with me. The scratching continued. It felt like it was getting closer, like whatever was on the other side of the glass was just waiting for me to make a mistake, to break. I had no idea how much longer I could hold it together. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs as the cavern stretched out before me, glowing with that sickly green light. The further I looked into the abyss, the more it seemed to pull at my soul, urging me to come closer. But Rule 5, never go deeper, pounded in my head like a drum. I couldn't go any further. Not like this. Not with what I was seeing. Then it appeared. A figure, hulking and twisted, loomed at the far end of the cavern. Its eyes were 2 burning orbs, glowing with an unnatural light, fixing me in its gaze. I couldn't tear my eyes away, even though every instinct screamed at me to look anywhere else. The figure didn't move. It just watched, its gaze almost predatory, as if it knew exactly what I was thinking. The comms crackled to life, static hissing through the air. Then, in the deepest part of my mind, I heard it. My own voice. Help me. I recoiled, my stomach churning as the voice echoed in my ears. It wasn't distorted, not like I expected. No, it was me, exactly like me. The same tone, the same desperation. But it wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I clenched my fists around the controls, willing myself to look away. But then, the figure spoke again, its voice now mimicking mine perfectly, just a little closer. I felt the urge to do exactly that, as if a part of me wanted to obey, wanted to move toward it. My body tensed, an overwhelming, gut-wrenching pull drawing me forward. But I slammed the controls into reverse, heart pounding as I fought against the compulsion. The sub jerked backward, the cavern's depths still calling to me, but I wouldn't give in. I couldn't. I had to get out. The ascent was agonizingly slow. Every meter felt like a battle against the ocean's crushing weight, each second dragging on as if the sea itself didn't want to let me go. The creature's voice, the voice that was somehow me, continued to echo through the comms, growing more frantic, desperate, pleading. Don't leave me. It clawed at my mind, its words slipping under my skin, worming their way into my thoughts, urging me to turn around. The sub shook violently, a deep, guttural tremor that rattled every bolt and screw. I gripped the controls harder, my knuckles white, trying to steady the sub as it groaned under the force of whatever was trying to hold it back. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't turn back now, not after everything. The rules, the creature, it wasn't real. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the surface broke open before me, the dark water giving way to the pale sky above. The sub bobbed for a moment, and I exhaled the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My heart was still pounding, my body shaking. I had made it. The rescue team was waiting. They stared at the sub with wide eyes, their faces pale, mouths agape. I tried to speak, to explain what happened, but my words caught in my throat. And then I saw it. The sub was covered in deep, jagged claw marks, scratches that hadn't been there before. But that wasn't all. Spindly, unnatural symbols were etched into the hull, twisting and curling like ancient runes. I didn't know what they meant, but I knew I had seen them before. In the cavern, on the creature. Later, when I reviewed the onboard camera footage, my blood turned cold. I could see it clearly now, the glowing-eyed figure staring directly into the lens. Its eyes were still burning, still locked on me, even from behind the glass. Its lips moved. No sound came out at first, but the tech expert worked to enhance the footage. The words were faint, almost a whisper, but they were clear. See you soon. And that's when I realized I hadn't just encountered it down there. That thing had been watching me, waiting, for much longer than I ever imagined. I never went back down. After that, I couldn't shake the feeling that the creature, whatever it was, had followed me. The rescue team, though visibly shaken, took precautions immediately. They locked down the entire operation. No one was allowed anywhere near the trench or even the submersible. The company issued a statement claiming it was an equipment malfunction. But I knew better. The others knew better. They installed extra security measures. All comms were monitored and dive protocols were revised. No more solo dives, no more unauthorized expeditions. The trench was off limits, and anyone who even mentioned it was quickly shut down. The team, once eager to explore, became terrified of what might still be lurking down there. The deeper you go, the more it changes. The farther you push, the more it sees you. They made sure to tell anyone who might attempt the dive again, never go deeper than 4,500 meters. There are things down there that should remain undiscovered. And as for me, I became a cautionary tale. A whisper in the halls of the company, a warning to those who thought they could handle the unknown. I'd go on to work other projects, but the memory of what I saw, what I heard, lingered with me. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that voice. My voice, mocking me, telling me to come closer. I haven't set foot near the water since. I've left the diving business behind. The team, those who survived the ordeal, did the same. The company, despite the official story they put out, quietly dismantled their operations in that area. I don't know who made that decision, but I'm glad they did. I don't know what that creature was. I don't care to. I don't know if it was some ancient being, something that had been waiting for us to find it, or if it had just come into existence when we disturbed that place. What I do know is that it was real. It wasn't just my imagination, and it's still down there, somewhere, waiting. I've kept my silence about it, but I'll say this now. There are things in the deep that humanity isn't meant to understand. Things that have been sleeping for longer than we can fathom, and we're not meant to wake them. If anyone ever tries to go back, they won't come back the same. Or maybe they won't come back at all. The trench is still there, just as it was before. But some places are better left undisturbed. So this is my story. If you want to hear more stories like this, drop the word "sea" in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to keep getting more chilling tales.